So I thought this might be interesting to some. This is kind of a blast from the past. And maybe something that absolutely nobody would be interested in. But how about we travel not 10 years back, not 15 years back, not 20 years back, but let's go back like 25 years. Let's take a look at Linux, and in particular KDE, from a viewpoint of 25 years ago. And I'm going to use SuSE 6.3. This is long before the age of OpenSUSE in this example. And I'm going to run it in order to get things like internet. I needed a Type 2 hypervisor, and the reason is because KVM, as nice as it is, only takes hardware back so far, and NICs like the E1000, as old as that is, for a choice, isn't going to be sufficient. I need to take it back even further. And some distributions I hear, in their qemu or in KVM, have some device drivers that go back further. Mine doesn't. It only has a couple of options, the VirtIO option and the E1000. So I needed to go ahead and get that PC32. I wanted to run a 386 style box, 32-bit. I needed a pcnet 32 style NIC, and so I chose qemu outside of KVM in order to be able to get that device, if that makes sense. And then for the display, nothing fancy here, but indicative of the times. This is a 1024 by 768 emulated display, and it's just using the Cirrus driver under qemu, so very basic, and nothing, but very much the times. And I mean, there's some things in this box that are not going to work, like HTTPS, because no one uses the encryption from 1999. So I'm not going to be able to browse HTTPS sites using this distribution. I can't even SSH, folks, okay? So, it's like having both your hands tied behind your back, so to speak. So I'm going to stop the screensaver. This nice pipes screensaver, which is kind of pretty. And this is good old KDE 1, okay? And so I've installed some things that maybe you would have done back in 1999, like installed the Netscape browser, but like I said, it's of limited use. It's not even going to work well on HTTP sites, the few that are out there, just because there's just so much in the realm of CSS and obviously JavaScript just isn't there in 1999. And so, again, of limited resource, so anything you try to do on this host, you're probably going to get very frustrated very fast. But I also installed StarOffice because I think that's interesting as a product. So, it's popular today, though you would probably be running LibreOffice or OpenOffice. But back when, this is post-acquisition, just post-acquisition, really, of StarOffice, which belonged to Star Division, and Sun Microsystems purchased it. And so this still falls into the category, into what SuSE calls the pay software category, so the non-open category. So this is before OpenOffice. Okay, and so it is kind of a back to the unified screen with regards to how you bring, so basically a dialogue environment. It was its own desktop environment with files and folders. And a lot of people weren't used to that, maybe even in 1999. But I tell you, one place you were used to it is if you came from a world pre-Windows, if you came from a world of workstations, and I'm talking about high-end workstations, like ones possibly original Sun Microsystems style workstations, but even things earlier than that. And in my case, it would be Apollo computer systems, Apollo workstations, with a program, say, like Interleaf on there. You can think of Interleaf as a very Mac-like UI, black and white, Windows, mouse, making use of all the buttons, left, right, middle, very intuitive in my perspective, but it also had this kind of desktop view. It wanted to present a graphical desktop where you can create folders and organize your documents and things like that. So in other words, I can't assume just because you have something like X Windows that you have a desktop environment. And so programs like this, programs like Interleaf, they gave you a desktop, if you will. Gave you your own desktop environment in this little dialog. And you get to choose, what do you want? Do you want a new text document? You click over here and double click on new text document, bring up a new text document, and then here you would, you type your document. Nothing, so it is the Office product of the time. It's just as capable as it was back then in 1999. Obviously, not as Windows compatible, though it could read some Windows files from that period, from 1999. So you have your options of, again, so you've got this all the idea of I'm in the StarOffice environment. I can close off the editor that I'm using and go back to my desktop and then bring up other kinds of documents. Here, spreadsheets and presentations, and then if I want to, I can go in here and say I want to create me a new folder, to organize my documents in. So it's very much a desktop environment, but it's a desktop environment inside of a productivity application, and it's designed to hold and manage the documents mainly of this application, show you all of your Office documents. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. But so you didn't have, in KDE, even in 1.0, using the KFM, Dolphin didn't exist back then, but using the KFM manager, you have this idea of folders, and I could even go into my Office 5.1, and you're like, oh man, that's a mess. It's like, where's my desktop and all that? It's like, well, there he is, right there at the top. And I can go into my desktop and actually get to, there's that new folder I created. Okay, so anyway, you just had to understand the times and where we were and how advanced something like KDE at the time. And again, this is version 1 of KDE, and we already have the idea of virtual workspaces and this nice menuing system, and and get to our applications, and of course to our games, and you have your some of these games you've seen even today, so there's not a whole lot of difference between the Mahjong back in 1999 and that you might have on your system today, and the one that you have on your system right now if it's the old X Mahjong, right? So anyway, I just wanted to show you that. I want to show you display config just because I think that's kind of interesting. So I clicked over here. You can also get it through the settings. So there's several ways to get to the panel, but this is like to configure, some of the more, this is one of those places that you spend a lot of time in, like even in Windows 98, which would have been kind of the equivalent of the day from the Windows side of the fence. And that's configuring things like your wallpaper, and setting that up, and then applying, choosing your screensaver, which I'm using this, Pipes GL, the 3D Pipes screensaver. Some of those are actually very familiar, but you could do stuff like, set it, do the whole thing where we're doing the scaled and some of the options that you probably have today with regards to how you set your wallpapers, like you're going to use a picture or something. But you didn't have to. You could go with, a color scheme, or do something, maybe with a gradient, so that you could, say, well, I want to have, blue and green, and that way you kind of get that. Never works in the demo. I did apply it, right? Or did I? This may be one of those things where just because you apply it, Chris, you're going to have to restart KDE in order to see this. And you have those kind of things. So there's going to be certain cases where you do some settings, and KDE will actually tell you you're not going to get that setting changed unless you log out of KDE and come back in. And all I'm doing here is I did a start X. Okay, so KDE set up as my default window environment, and this, of course, is this is before we had Xorg, Xorg. This is good. This is X-Free 86. Okay, and it was designed back in the day when you had to compute your own mode lines and figure out your horizontal and vertical syncing and all the rise and edges of your monitor sync in order to keep from blowing your monitor up. I'm not kidding you. It was that hard back in those days to set up your monitor. It even took me a while to figure out the right driver combination to get something that would display in a resolution that I thought might be acceptable to do this small demonstration. So what else? I don't know if there's too much else I want to say. I can show you the problems, but I think you probably already know. So, you go into Netscape, you can bring up the old Netscape browser. This is 4.7 of Netscape. But the problem is that, sites just aren't there anymore, or the reason they don't work is because they're encrypted. So things that aren't encrypted, oddly enough, Google still maintains their site in an unencrypted manner, so they can spy on everything. I think it's important to them to be able to hit as many people as possible. So even if you do a search here, the results is going to be ugly. It's not going to look good. And of course, as soon as you try to click into anything, it's going to say, I can't go there. I don't have the ability to, match up encryption-wise with that site. And that's pretty much what you're going to get universally through here. That just so happens, as the former president of the North Texas Linux Users Group, and not necessarily intentionally, but the old North Texas Linux Users Group webpage is strictly HTTP, so it actually kind of works. Again, with the problems that you might have with regards to presentation, but it actually kind of almost functions, and it just still, any kind of linkages are going to take you to things that are going to be encrypted, so nothing's going to work. So everything's of pretty much no use, so back in these days, stuff would have worked because it wasn't encrypted, and if it was encrypted, it was using really old encryption, 1.0 style encryption, and it had those kind of ciphers involved. And then, of course, today you have SSH, so you have other ways to get at stuff, and we don't have any of that. There's no SSH here, so there's really not a whole lot we can do. So this is a very frustrating environment to work in. But and it's also kind of amazing at the same time, because you're like, we just went back to 1999 here, and we did it on a contemporary Linux host, and isn't that amazing in and of itself? Documentation wise, the documentation on here, they have the SuSE manual on here in PDF format, but GhostView had so many errors trying to view this that I had to go ahead and install the AccuRead, which comes in the paid for section of the SuSE RPMs in SuSE 6.3. I had to install the old AccuRead PDF reader so that I could actually view this documentation. And it's kind of fun, going back in time again and taking a look at the first edition of YAST. So this is actually predates YAST 2. It's very primitive and not very useful, like it might be, but it's still, it's just interesting to watch, and see how things, evolved over time. Anyway, I thought you might enjoy just a brief, tour back in yesteryear. If y'all have anything you want to see me try to run on this thing, don't go totally OpenGL on me or anything. And of course, realize what the state of OpenGL was back in those days. We're talking Voodoo, people using Voodoo cards, and you might have been lucky to have a Matrox, on your system. But so nothing like that. But if there's anything else you want me to, there might be a package for it you might want to see, I could try to install that and we could take a look at it. Otherwise, hope you enjoyed this tour going back in the past.